I'd like to, at this time, thank all of the people who participated in making this Unity Breakfast a success, especially those members of the committee who put in some long hours. And then at this time, I'd like to introduce one of the individuals who has played a major role in this Unity Breakfast, as he has in the 14 that have preceded this. And with that, I'll give you Jack. Good morning. My name is Jack Keegan, and I'm an alcoholic. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce this morning's speaker. His name is Peter. I've heard him speak at the Mineola anniversary, and he has a great message. And without any further from me, I'll give you Peter from the Recovery House in Long Island.
My name is Peter, and I'm an alcoholic. And I'm not here to convert anybody. I really believe an occasion like this deserves the best you've got. This is the closest thing I have to a tuxedo, and that's the only reason. If you just look next to you to the closest miracle at your table, and then look up and look around the room and experience the feeling that comes from the awareness of where we are on Sunday morning together, everything I have to say from then on is anticlimactic. I'm indeed privileged to be asked to share this with you. I was born in Akron, Ohio during Prohibition, which, I don't believe in predestination, but as I think about my life, it makes increasingly good sense. My father was alcoholic, and my mother, with the permission of the church, it had to be that because, she was always at daily mass and so forth. Left my father with 5 young children and went all the way from Buffalo, New York, down to St. Petersburg, Florida, and put my brother and I in a Salesian orphanage near Tampa. And while there, I heard my father had died. A little while ago, I got his death certificate, and it says John Paul Swiesgood, approximate cause of death, congestive heart failure, and cirrhosis of the liver, age 37. I heard that he died. I didn't cry a whole lot because I had vivid memories of, him fighting with my mother and promising things that he never brought about, telling us not to wet the bed and then passing out on the couch and wetting the couch and things like that. I guess everybody has seen that sort of thing. And while in the orphanage, Mother elicited a vow from both my brother and myself that we wouldn't drink till we were 21 years of age, a vow that a 9-year-old had very little difficulty making. With all these vivid memories of my father, ugly as they were, but I was to have a great deal of trouble keeping the vow. I remember graduating from high school down at St. Leo, and somebody had the daring to put a little half pint in this huge bowl of punch, and everybody was drinking it and getting giddy, and my brother and I had to walk away from it like a couple of jerks, and I really resented my mother's forcing us to make this vow. But I kept the vow, and then into the service, I went into the CBs. I got in there by a fluke. I didn't like the way they pushed me around in boot camp, and I had a red-headed temper, and of course, being the product of an alcoholic home, you develop a lot of anger there someplace, and they pushed me around, and they threw shoes at me and cut my hair, and I wanted to punch somebody, and I didn't have anybody to punch. They talked about the brig and square needles and, where they put them, and things like that, and I was both angry and frightened, and just turned 18 years of age. My mother had to sign the papers to go in. And they put us in this huge drill hall, and they gave us this 3-hour test. It was called the General Classification Test, and we're supposed to read the question, multiple choice, and mark these things, whatever you choose, A, B, C. And I said, I'll show you people, and I didn't read any of the questions. I just put down the marks and the answers, and I finished a 3-hour test in about 15 minutes. I went up and threw it at the guy, I'm going to show these people, and after a while, the marks began to come back, and guys that were barely literate were going to radar school, electronic school, and so forth. And they put me in the CVs. Everybody knows that construction men drink too much, and everybody knows that Navy men drink too much, and CVs were construction men in Navy uniforms, and we sent out more copper tubing than any other spare part to forward areas when I was there. But I had this crazy vow, that I'm not going to drink. And at one time in my life, I was extremely honest. I went overseas very quickly, and I watched guys not getting up for church on Sunday that I knew were Catholic, and I thought, oh my God, that's awful. This is the days of mortal sin. Years ago, it looked awfully attractive, and I wanted to do it, but I began to, have some wonder why I was going to church all the time, and I realized it was because my mother said to, and so before throwing this entire aspect of my life out the window, I decided to check it out a little bit at the age of 18. So I began picking up pamphlets in the back of these Quonset chapels on the Mass and purity. I had a lot of trouble with purity. That's another word that we don't use anymore, but the more I read, the more I was attracted to this thing on a little more adult level than just, go to church because Mom said to. And so I began a rather real, shallow, but real conversion experience, and began to go to church a lot, and I was disgusted, to come to Liberty Launch. I'm overseas now in Pearl Harbor. I have a ship service at the mouth of I sold literally thousands of cases of khaki-colored cans of beer at 10 cents a can to my buddies, but I never touched a drop of it because of the coincidence. Timing is everything in this thing, coincidence of this conversion experience with the vow and being away from home and everything like that. And I was very obnoxious in those days. I'd walk away from a dirty joke, and I'd fight if you said something that indicated you didn't really like the Blessed Mother. And I was the kind of person that I would have nothing to do with if I knew me now. I was absolutely. But I think you have to go through that kind of a thing, and as part of my growing. And no drinking. Everybody else is drinking. I watched them at the Liberty Launch wallowing in their own puke, their whites all dirty, and I'd say, oh, how awful. And, what do they want to drink that stuff for? And thank God I'm not drinking. And all this stuff. And so I came out in April. I turned 21 in July, and I went to a Knights of Columbus party in Jacksonville, Florida in August, a month before I was to go off to the seminary. I had decided somewhere along this time to become a priest and go back to the monastery where I had gone to school, the Benedictine Monastery of St. Leo in Florida. And I went to the party, and I didn't even advert to the fact that they had a keg of what weekends are made for, and my buddy brought me, it always fascinates me, the perverse pleasure that some people get in watching somebody do something for the first time like this. When I was bellhopping, when I was a water boy and 15 years of age up in Washington, D.C., I'd go from the painters to the plumbers to the carpenters and give them cups of water. And they all were offering money to see me do something else for the first time. They really wanted to. It's always fascinating. So this guy brought me a paper cup of amber fluid, and he says, Pete, you're 21 now. I had to think about it because I was so used to turning drinks down. I got through the peer pressure thing. I really didn't need to drink now. And he says, why don't you have a beer? And I thought, I've demonstrated to myself I've got a very strong will. I quit smoking. I was testing myself to see if I could make it in the monastery. And I had stayed away from those pretty little Japanese girls overseas, and they got prettier by the minute, and I was over there for 3 years, and it wasn't easy. And so some of my buddies succumbed, and they came back, with these beautiful Oriental-looking kids with names like Kelly and Murphy. And but I had resisted that, and so I knew that I had a strong will, and I had the highest ideals that I'm capable of, and I really thought that alcoholism was something that happened to people like my father. He was weak and not too tightly wrapped, and, he had these deficiencies, probably, intellectual, emotional, psychological, whatever, and I knew that I wasn't of that ilk. I had demonstrated to myself I was all right. So when he offered that, all this went through my mind very quickly, and I took the cup, and I said, why not? And I drank it. It was cold, it was wet, and I guess my German genes didn't have to be educated to like the taste of it. I even liked the taste of it. And I liked that little euphoric dividend it gave you. And I think sometime during the night they tried to put an application to the night's pumice in my hand, but I didn't get drunk. I only had 2 or 3 of these, and I resisted that. And now I have nothing against the nights. I really someday may join, but I've got to get in there and do something from within. Anyway, I went off to the seminary, and the seminary was in the monastery of St. Bernard, Alabama, and the man that you've heard speak up here in Westchester, Abbot Hilary Draper, was my prefect, and I know Hilary very well, going back a lot of years. And I had no idea that he had any alcohol problems at that time. He was just a great teacher and a lot of fun. I remember him as a young monk, but I was at St. Bernard, and don't ever feel sorry for seminarians, we miss the girls a lot, but the jokes you're going to hear 6 months from now are being concocted in the seminaries right now. And I was motivated to study for the first time in my life. I really began to make the honor roll, and the prayer life was vigorous, and lots of good sports, athletics that would make the Steelers and the Cowboys look like we really got out a lot of aggressions on the football field, and in the white hot furnace of fraternal charity. Anyway, it was a great time, and no drinking at all. It was dry county in Cullman, Alabama. Lots of beer cans in the ditches alongside the road, but it was a dry county. And no drinking. So during that time, I went into the mission. That's the year that they look at you and you look at them. And you decide whether you want to be a monk, and they decide whether they want you. And, they scrutinize you pretty well. All the monks in the monastery, 4 times a year, take you apart, put you back together again, and decide whether they want you to go on or quit. Again, I'm proving to myself I have the mettle, and it certainly bothered me to drink. A couple of times, there were a couple little instances during that time that I had, little run-ins with drinking, but nothing outstanding. And then off to the second 2 years of college up in Kansas, Atchison, Kansas, St. Benedict. I was on the banks of the Missouri River, and I'm hearing all this time things about, I'm hearing the rule of St. Benedict and the chapter on the amount of drink. There's, I think, 72 chapters in the rule. It's a masterpiece of Roman legislation. And one of the chapters, St. Benedict, by the way, was Italian, and he had an Italian liver. And he wrote a rule, and he had this, a chapter on the amount of drink. And it goes something like this. Though it would be better for monks not to drink anything at all, due to the rigors of the climate and the custom of our time, we will permit 1 hemina of wine a day. Now, I don't know of anybody, and I know thousands of Benedictines, who took the trouble to discover how much, or what a hemina is. But I did. I did so much. And I found in a big, thick, esoteric tome on commentary on the rule, next to some Greek footnotes, a description of a hemina which is a little better than a pint, which is not bad, And I thought that, Benedict was a very wise father, and things like this. My moral theology was talking about, how alcohol, I love this description, could be thought of as a social lubricant. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, a social lubricant. Yeah, and that's what it said. It talked about how you go from being mortally, no sin at all, and then the venial sin, and then it goes to you hit the X factor, and you go over into mortal sin. And I by this time, I'd never been drunk. I'd had a few drinks now and then, but no drinking. And they decided to revive the old Benedictine custom at St. Benedict's of table wine, and they had all us clerics go out to the vineyards and pick the grapes. And we had a lot of fun doing it, and then the bigger guys were asked to go down in the basement and work these big old presses, and they looked like they'd been there 1,000 years. This is a beautiful monastery, fieldstone, Gothic, on the banks of the Missouri River, acres and acres of corn and vineyards. And it's what everybody thinks a medieval monastery ought to be. Well, I don't know. Probably all think a monastery is a place that got fat little monks with Xerox machines or something. But this wasn't that way. It's a fairly decent bunch of guys that are trying to live the Christian life to the full. More some you like, some you don't like any place else, like any family, and a lot of prayer, a lot of work, very little drinking. Anyway, we went down and we squeezed this grapes, put it in barrels, and put it into the wine cellar. And I'd never been to the wine cellar, and I don't know whether to this time it was by design or by accident that I happened to be the last guy down there before everybody ran up to put their clothes on, their habits on for Vespers. But I was jackassing this big barrel of raw grape juice into the wine cellar, and I had to duck down to go in, and there in front of me was an array of bottles and casks and all kinds of things, lovingly inscribed with date and so forth by these German monks, elderberry and honey mead and everything you can imagine. And I thought to myself as I stood there in the door, isn't God good? I have been drinking all this time, and I still have no idea what my X factor is. And this is a perfect opportunity. So with that, I took a little this, a little that, a little something else. And by the way, let me just parenthetically insert here. I think my whole movement, at least between the ears, apart from the biochemistry that goes on, into alcoholism was a movement away from rigorous honesty. I was so honest in the service it makes me sick to think of it. But now I'm beginning to move away from rigorous honesty. I don't get this of myself. I read the 5th chapter many, many times, and it constantly impresses me how the insights that these men had to put that chapter together. Every time I read it, there's something new that jumps out at me. But the essence of recovery is a movement back toward honesty, and I think this corresponds with I remember a time when I was in novitiate, and I think this is very important, a very insignificant sort of thing, but in those days there was no concelebration. Every priest would take, every priest would take an altar and say Mass, and he'd have one of us clerics or novices assigned to him to light the candles and put, most of you guys are altar boys, so you remember, and say the Confiteor and all that stuff. And I was assigned to this priest one time. I don't know at what point of the novitiate it was, but I remember setting everything up and serving the Mass. The Mass is over now, and I'm back in the sacristy, and I'm just about to dump out. I'm wearing a Benedictine habit now, and I'm getting ready to take the solemn vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And I've gotten all kinds of indoctrination and everything else, and I'm about to pour out the wine through it. There's a little bit of wine left in the thing, and I think to myself, well, now, wait a minute. That's kind of wasteful, and I'm going to take a vow of poverty, so I really should be a little more responsible than that. So I looked around, I found the bottle from which the wine came, and I was just about to pour it back in there, and I remember from my chemistry course that ethyl alcohol is very volatile and evaporates very quickly. I remember from my theology course that wine has to be a certain alcohol content to be valid matter for the Mass, 12%. And I figured, this wine has been exposed and pouring it into the cruet now, and it probably has lost some of its alcohol content, so it might really contaminate the wine that I put in the bottle, and I was left with no alternative. I had to drink it. I mean, this is the kind of thing, that was to happen more, and that's a minor one. Later on, it gets akin to psychosis, but this is the beginning. Anyway, and every time, all the way through my drinking history, there is those rationalizations and things that I mean, there's a whole history of these things. The mental gymnastics that I went through in order to justify drinking were incredible. I just wish I could harness the energy. We would have no crisis. Anyway, back to this time. Now I'm at the door there, and I'm having all this wine, checking my X Factor, and nothing happened. So I went back upstairs. I put on my habit. I had it there. And I was going to choir. It was about time, and a guy met me on the stairs, and he said, "Peter, you all right?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" He said, "You're awful pale." And that's the last thing I remember. The next thing I remember is getting out of bed in the morning with a terrible, terrible headache, and my roommate, Father Stephen Collins' brother, Frater at the time, told me he'd put me to bed the night before, and I saw my habit had all kinds of mud on the bottom. I guess I went down along the levees of the Missouri River, but I don't remember a thing. The first time I got intoxicated was the first time I blacked out, which should have told me something. And, of course, in those days, if you did anything wrong, you missed choir or you were late for something, some religious exercise, you'd line up outside the sociist's office and go in one by one, kneel down, and just like you went to confession. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. I was late, or I did this." And Father Theodore Leuterman was the sociist at the time, and he had big, thick eyebrows that looked like John L. Lewis, He wasn't a very big man. And I knelt down very humbly, and I said, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. I got drunk yesterday." And I felt his eyebrows go boom. And he said, I'll never forget it because it really got to me. He said, "Father Frater, stumbled around a little bit because he wasn't used to hearing anybody say he got drunk yesterday." And he said, if you have a tendency this way, perhaps you should get out of the order. And that got right to where I lived because in spite of everything, I really think I had a genuine vocation. So I stopped drinking for a couple of years and went back to St. Leo Abbey, coaching, teaching, and at some point began to drink again. And, we have one beer every first-class feast day at St. Leo. And that's about, at that time, I guess about 11 beers a year. Now, it's very, very difficult to become alcoholic on that kind of drinking. But it can be done. And it's got to be supplemented with other things, of course. And I was ordained in 1955, and of course, with ordination, we have you laymen very well trained. As soon as we walk in the house, you're supposed to ask, "What do you have, Father?" And you don't mean coffee. I was never known to turn down a drink. And my brother had a bottle of Jack Daniels in the car when at my ordination. I just thought of this the other day. And between the 168 miles between St. Leo and Jacksonville, I finished that whole fifth of Jack Daniels. I used to think Jack Daniels was something nutritious. It was I read the thing sipping whiskey, filtered through charcoal. I really thought I was doing my liver a favor when I could have made a great case for selling Jack Daniels in health food stores. Anyway, by the time I got up to Jacksonville, I was bombed. I think I'm one of the few priests that said his first Mass in a horrible hangover. I just remember that. And so this should have told me something, but it's so isolated. The things weren't that packed in together. And I went back to the Abbey. I was quite successful teaching, coaching. And then they wanted to start a college at St. Leo, so they wanted me to go off and get my master's degree. They sent me up to Notre Dame. And before going, because I thought I was drinking a little more than I should, I went to the abbot and I said, "Father Abbot, I think I'm drinking too much, and I really would like to take a pledge." I'd heard about these pledges. And he said, "What?" And, his concept of an alcoholic was 65 years old, cirrhotic liver, wet brain, all the rest of it. And I'm 32, and I'm healthy as a horse. I'm a coach and an athletic director and all this stuff, leading the calisthenics, and it boggles his mind, and I guess he thinks I'm scrupulous or something like that. But he humors me, and he finds this little pledge card, and I kneel down, and he gives it to me, and I remember tears welled up in my eyes, and I really was sincere about this. And I took the pledge, and I went off to Notre Dame. Now, these are the days before the Second Vatican Council when we still wore religious habits. They had bird-watching manuals for the nuns and so forth. They could the Dutch cleanser and the fractured skull and everything else. And it was a great time. We had priests and nuns from all over the country, and the conversations about, what they're doing in various areas, very stimulating. taken courses in philosophy, And then in the evening, had a wonderful custom of putting on civilian clothes, which was daring in those days, and going into South Bend to one of the little bistros and having a piece of pizza and a beer and talk about Hegel or Kant or whatever it was. I found these really wonderful sessions. And I'm drinking my beer, my Coca-Cola, and everybody else is drinking their beer, and there seemed to be a wall between me and them. It's kind of like it wasn't service. They seemed to be getting into this thing, really, and getting more out of these sessions in the evening than they did during the class periods. And I began to think, hey, what did I do? I'm really doing myself a disservice. I'm not getting the full benefit of my education up here. And my mind began to work. And I remembered the thing in the theology course about an unjust law is no law at all. And I remembered another part of theology that said you must not multiply mortal sins. In other words, make mortal sins where there is no mortal sin. And I had actually made a mortal sin out of taking a can of beer. And I thought how dumb that was. So I made an appointment with a theologian, and really do this right, And I wore sandals and beards long before sandals and beards were in. And I made an appointment at 7 o'clock in the evening after supper. I went up to his room, and you'd all been proud of me. I sold this guy the Triborough, the Brooklyn, the Manhattan, the whole thing. He gave me one of the best talks, I've used it many times since, on scrupulosity I have ever heard in my life. And he said, Father, I want you to drink. And, thank you. And I went out of there, and he almost went out and got me a six-pack. And I'm thinking I'm being so honest and above board and everything. So I finally had worked my way into the little apartment across Dixie Highway, across the golf course in St. Joe High School. It was the only apartment in the high school, beautiful place to drink, And within a week or two, I'm going up Dixie Highway 8 miles across the Michigan border on Sunday to get a fifth of vodka on a bicycle against the traffic, which is, in your right mind. Doesn't everybody, And how I got my master's, I'll never know. Sometime during that year, I felt terribly guilty. I was beginning to miss office now and go to confession frequently. Bless me, Father, if I sin, drank too much, and of course, 3 Hail Marys and exercise your willpower, and it'll go away. And no mention of any problem. Alcoholism was, moral, and you could beat it. And I really believe this. And I poured out good stuff, in the John. And I shudder to think of this sometimes. But anyway. And I'd make various periods of not drinking and then go back and try to control it, and things weren't working out. I was feeling terrible inside. I was guilty. I was, for the first time in my life, I was unhappy with myself. In those years, which were happy years for the most part. And I decided that I was going to, I'd heard about this organization. Alcoholism doesn't run in my family. It gallops from both sides. And my two uncles on my mother's side, Bart and Elwin Stouffer, both had the problem, and my father had it. And I knew the only sober breath that Bart ever drew was when he was with this strange group called Alcoholics Anonymous. I think it was run by Sister Ignatius or something up around in Akron. And so I looked up in this little thin South Bend directory for AA, and they didn't have an AA. I said, I guess it hasn't reached down in Alabama here. Then, of course, I'm very bright. I'm getting my MA, and I figured maybe it's under Alcoholics Anonymous. So I looked under AL, and there it was. And I called up the number, and the next day they sent a man over to see me, and I'm waiting for his visit in my digs there, and he knocked on the door, and I opened the door, and here's this big, tall, gaunt man about, 60, 70 years old. The flesh is hanging off his face, and he's got big, thick glasses that make his eyes look huge. And I'm thinking to myself, I didn't say it to him. I said, boy, there's one, So he comes in and he has this test with him. Of course, I'm a professional student by this time, and so I say, sure, I'll take the test. And I answered 18 yeses out of a possible 20. And then I read the bottom. One, you might be, and I thought, hey, wait a minute. Two, you probably are. Three, you're definitely alcoholic. I thought this to myself. I had the courtesy not to say it to him, but I thought, you dirty rat. You want everybody in your club, and this is a real sneaky way to try to get them in. But I said, thank you very much, and where's the meetings? And he told me, and so he left, and I was going to go. Later on that afternoon, a priest friend of mine, a drinking buddy, really, he has since joined us somewhere out in Montana, but he was to go a few more years, and he came in, and I told him, you probably had this experience, I told him what I was going to do, and he turned pale. Of course, he's thinking, if I have this, then what about him? But he manifested tremendous concern for me, and he said, Pete, you don't want to go to these AA meetings? And I said, why not? I said, I don't know how you... He said, well, just control yourself, cut back or whatever. I said, Sam, I've tried to do these things, but I failed, and I don't care what you say or anything else. I'm going to go to some of these meetings. And it worked for my uncle, and maybe it'll work for me. And then he said, have you ever been to an AA meeting, Pete? I said, no, but I know it worked for Bart. He said, well, I'm from Montana, and in our seminary training, they let us go to some meetings. And he said, they've got women in AA. I mean, just think about this. This is 1958, long before the Thornbirds was even thought about. And, there's still some of us that are trying, believe me. And so I said, Sam, I don't care what you say, I'm going to go to these meetings. He said, yeah, Pete, but, I said, they got women in the church, Sam. I figured that. It ain't easy, but we can do it. And he said, yeah, but AA's not the same thing. He said, some of these gals have lost their husbands. They're, lonely, a bit insecure. And he said, I know you're a very empathetic sort of guy. He said, I can see you being in a lot more trouble in AA than you ever were just then. And, if Satan himself had come down and presented me with a rationalization that would have kept me away from meetings, it couldn't have been better than that. And with that, I said, I thought about it for about 15 seconds. I said, Sam, I guess you're right. And I didn't go. I went back to the monastery, teaching, coaching. We started a college down there, St. Leo College. It was the best years of my life. I didn't have time to drink that much. But when I did, I drank, and episodic, like the time we had planned for 6 months to go down to fish in Charlotte Harbor. And I love to fish. And I'd never been tarpon fishing. And so we planned this. You guys that fish, you know what I'm talking about. We planned it for 6 months. Myself and another coach, and one of the guys who was recently converted to the faith, who took care of our chicken farm. He had the boat. And some grateful parent had given me a fifth of Sour Mash whiskey. That happens every now and then. It's supposed to go up to the abbot's office, but mine very rarely got there. And we didn't have to take it there. And so I used to use it to get sleep at night, It was very medicinal. And so I brought the bottle with me, and we got down as far as Tampa on the way to Charlotte Harbor, down near Fort Myers, and we stopped to get some crabs and bait and stuff like that, and I broke out the fifth, and we got some Cokes, and each one of us had a little social drink. And I'm sitting in the back seat with this open bottle now, and I'm drinking it like, I don't know how to drink at this time. I don't think I ever did, but I really didn't know at this time what 100 proof would do. And by the time we got down there, I think I'd finished a great part of the fifth, and I don't remember getting on the boat. It was in the dark, and we went out into Charlotte Harbor, and I remember dawn was coming up, and there were a lot of other boats around, and by now I'm coming in and out of a blackout. You ever had that experience? And some things I remember, some things I don't, and there was a rod and reel that I really loved. I spent a lot of time getting enough money to buy this thing. I had a bout of poverty, and I bought it, and I cherished it, and I'd oil it and take care of it. I got a backlash in that thing, and I didn't like that, and I threw the thing overboard. Very expansive move, and my old CB language began to come back, and this poor convert is listening to all this stuff, and I'm being chastised by my other friend, and I decided, to hell with you people, and I dove in the water. Fully clothed, I swam about a mile to shore. It's Beaufort Grand, and there's houses on palmetto stilts, and the sun is just barely coming out now. And I get to the thing, and I remember looking through the screen door of this house up on top of the stilts, and there's these eyes peering out at me, you know. And I told these guys, it's Iwo Jima, and the Japs are coming, but get the hell out of there. And I went down around the house and started. By now, the dawn is up, you know, and there's a million boats out there. And I don't know where my boat is, but I'm going to find it, you know. So I went to dive in the water. This guy tackled me from behind, and I turned around, you know. I'm like a piece of gristle. I said, "What do you want, buddy?" And he said, "Hey, don't go back out there." He said, we you know, Charlotte Harbor's always got a lot of sharks in it. And he said, when the tarpon are rolling like they are now, it's infested with them. He said, "You're not going to make it to the boat." And I said, "Come on." You know how they are. I guess, you know, even a great white doesn't want to eat something like that, so I obviously made it to the boat, and but the thing that bothered me the most about that had nothing to do with it. The thing that bothered me the most was what I had said. I don't remember what I said in front of this convert, and for weeks after that, I used to go and genuflect in front of him, "Please forgive me," you know. I didn't mean to do that, and because I didn't know what, so. But this was now and then, and I decided then every now and then drinking too much, and I felt I was drinking more than I should, and I went to the abbot and asked him if I'd go away to guest house. And he called up, and this is apparently a pretty big problem among priests. They had a 5-month waiting list, you know. And, of course, it was the only place in the country at that time, you know. Give us credit. So he said, "Why don't you go down to Newport Richie and be the pastor down there this summer, and we'll talk about it in the fall." And I did, and I drank every night more than I ever did, but those old people loved me down there and gave me the biggest party they ever had when I left, and he thought that was a sign that I was all right now. And he said, "Why don't you go up to New York? We'd like to make you the president of the college, and get your doctorate in the philosophy of science and at St. John's, and while you're at it, you know, do something about your drinking problem." Now, this is typical of alcohol of superiors in all kinds of places. Go up and get your Ph.D. in the philosophy of science and overcome your terminal illness at the same time. Yeah. So, with that, I came up here to do just exactly that. And I went back and forth to St. John's University, working on my doctorate, getting A's and doing very well, and disintegrating. You know, I'll condense a lot of this now. I don't want to keep you too long. I was now pulled out of 4 total wrecks. I was jailed twice for fighting cops, you know, at different times. I always wore civilian clothes. And I was in 2 insane asylums, one not far from here, St. Vincent's. I was diagnosed sane in both of these insane asylums. You know, some good things have to come out of this program because I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm certified. And twice. And I lean very heavily on that, about the full moon every month. But anyway, I really began to get sick, and then, you know, when you're a priest, they quickly pick you up and put you someplace because you might give scandal. So I was, you know, a corner straight and narrow twice with Monsignor Wall, and came out. We used to watch those people down and make it by the bar. Those of you who've been there. Anyway, we 5 months. I went 5 months with Father Fred at Sterling. Father Fred had me say in Mass the second day that I was there. I love Father Fred. He's one of the finest human beings I will ever know, and one of the greatest clergymen. And he's got a tremendous apostolate among the alcoholic people and Al-Anon and so forth. But, you know, I really shouldn't have been saying Mass. I was no more capable of saying Mass than a carrot. I was a walking, talking vegetable. And most everybody in his place was drinking at that time. I resisted for about a week, and then I spent the 5 months drinking. And I'd go, I'd tell him I had bad legs, and I had to walk. And all the rest of these people were much older than I was, and they said, "Okay, go ahead and walk." So I'd walk 11 miles up to Sterling, buy 2 pints, put on this big old coat, and walk about 3 miles over and come back through the great swamp, you know, drinking and talking to the deer and the birds. this is, and my community is paying all this money for me to get well. And they had a psychiatrist there, one of the few psychiatrists I liked. He was a nice guy. And they'd sent me to him, and I'd talk to him about sports or fishing or whatever. And he always asked me what I dreamt. And I may dream, but I don't remember my dreams, so I couldn't tell him. And I felt sorry for him because every time I left him, he looked kind of sad. Like we're really not getting anywhere. And I wanted to make him feel happy, so I knew all the Freudian symbolism. I'd had a lot of this stuff in my pastoral courses, and I made up a beautiful, complex, Freudian Technicolor dream with the snakes in the right places and the reds and all the right colors. And I came in this morning and he said, "Pete, did you dream anything like I always did?" And I said, "Doctor, it must be that, you're asking me about, I had a dream. Not only had a dream, it was all night long and it was in Technicolor, and here's the way it went." And he sat there and he smiled and he brightened up, and I made him very happy. And, we wonder why they don't help us when we do this sort of thing. And my community is spending all this money, while I'm playing these kind of... so I came out, I went back and forth to St. John's, another parish now, and then did something else, and they sent me off to Dick Caron's place down in Chit-Chat. Caron saw my track record, and he said, "Well," he said, "we have a 28-day stay here, but with your track record, you've got 3 months, buddy." And I didn't have any recourse. I was in the hands of these people. I didn't have a lot of money to lean back on, and my youth was fast escaping. And where does the monk go? I own nothing. So I kind of had to go along with the program, and I complied for 3 months. And they gave me a letter that back to my community said something like, "Father Peter Swiesgood is one of the nicest patients we've ever had. He's been very helpful to other patients here, and we really feel that he'll have no more problem with drinking." And I went back, and I was drunk within a month. And I went into 55th and First. I'd been through all 3 dioceses, Rockville Center, then a year with Bishop Denning in Queens, and then, into the Archdiocese now. I'm exhausting these places. They take me to the border and say, "We love you, Pete, but don't come back," kind of thing. And so I now at 55th and First in the city, and I went there telling them I'm alcoholic. I even went down to some meetings with the old Sutton group. If you were there, you probably remember seeing me there with my collar on, never saying that I had alcoholism. I was there like a concerned curate trying to find out about you people, or write a book or be helpful to you in the confessional or something, that sort of thing. I was absolutely, and I'm stealing now. I would wait for Bucky O'Connor, this wonderful Monsignor O'Connor, to turn his back, and I'd grab a handful of green and hope there was a $5 bill and stick it in my pocket. You people are, don't put many $5 bills in this. And I justified it. I'm thinking to myself, don't muzzle the ox that tramples out the grain. I'm sick, and you people just don't understand it. I need this. This is medicinal. And so I was there for a while, and I finally succumbed. They found me asleep over the wheel of my car. I drove a lot, and why I didn't kill somebody, I just don't know. Thank God. And they said, "You've got to go away someplace." I called Father Fred. He didn't want me back there. It's bad when they begin rejecting you from drunk farms, So he said, "There's a place out in Alina Lodge, she specializes in difficult cases. And why don't you call Geraldine Delaney out there at Alina, and maybe she will accept you." And I called up, and they had a bed. I borrowed $400 from a friend of mine and enough money to rent a car. I had a buddy drive me out to the place, and I got out there with my collar on, and I went to the office reeking of the booze from the night before. They thought I was drinking. And I said, "I am not." And I was, by this time, everything I loathed. I was a liar. I was a cheat. I was the essence, I guess, of hypocrisy. I was arrogant, which was a false front for this fearful, scared human being somewhere deep inside me. And I really began to manifest what I really was at that place. They waited until my blood pressure got down, my vital signs, to a point where I could go to meetings. And this elderly, middle-aged woman got up and began talking. And she made awfully good sense, but boy, was she tough. I thought, hey, I wouldn't want to cross this one. And she talked for about an hour, and then she asked if you wanted any questions. And by now, she'd humiliated me terribly. She'd sent me downstairs to take off my collar. I'd been hiding behind this for years. And I felt like I was denuded. I had to go down to the basement and take some of these clothes off the rack. I had no civilian clothes, no ties. And I wore a coat that came to about here. I looked like Ichabod Crane for the first 2 weeks. I'm sitting there, and I want to make sure these people know what they've got here. These doctors' wives and so forth that are at these drunken people. And so I waited until she was all through, and she asked for questions. And I waited for a polite amount of time, and then I raised my hand, and I asked, in my best pre-doctoral polysyllabic vocabulary, an extremely intelligent question on whether or not alcoholism is heritable. And she said, why don't you sit down and shut up? I see you know, Mother. And take off your intellectual pants. You really stuck it home. And so I wasn't going to stay around for that stuff. And I'm going back from this place to the roost where we slept in this old barn. And there's a guy there with a big deep voice that kept me awake for almost a whole night that I was full of church there. It sounded like a big honcho in the place. I sidled up to him, and I'm going to find out which way out of this place. And he said, I asked him, how do you get out of here? He said, well, you go down the hill there, and there's a creek down at the bottom, and you go up the next hill, and there's a road called 94. Turn to your left, that's the way. And he didn't try to encourage me to stay or say, what are you doing? He said, go. He's here right now. His name is John H., and he's listening to me. So I got so mad then. It was just exactly the right thing to say. I'm not going to leave this place. I gave them the last $400 I'll ever have, and at least I can eat for a while I plan my next move. You know how we are. And so I grudgingly went back, and in 2 weeks I was able to sleep a little bit and eat a little better, but I was doing everything they told me not to do. They said not to play Scrabble. I'd find people to play Scrabble with. They said don't read other things in the Blue Book. I'd read Westerns. Anything was available. I'd sit in the back of things and burp and make I'd draw pictures of people hanging themselves and absolutely, I'm doing them a favor by being here, and by the end of the month, the first month, I was beginning to, I couldn't wait to get out of there. A month. And I went and said something to a gal named Kate Tanzola about how I was looking forward to getting out so I could help alcoholics. She scoffed at me like I was, dirt. And I'll never forget it. And then they made us take a fourth step, a written fourth step. And I only took it because I wanted to comply and get out of there. I was afraid if you didn't take your fourth step, it wouldn't let you out. So I took the fourth step, and in the process of taking the fourth step, you can't lie, and that's why it's written, I guess. My rationalizations were leaping off a page at me, I was mollifying this and that and so forth. I began to speak graphically the disintegration of myself. Dean of students in college, athletic director, winning ball clubs, and all this stuff, successful. 7 years later, I'm now signing mass cards for little old ladies maybe once a week. At this parish where they got more money, they don't need God, Sutton Place, and getting drunk all the time, and I think to myself, hey, something's happening to me, and I've been hearing all this good stuff, 3 meetings a day, and I began to get well. And of course, the reason I got well there, and not at Chit Chat or not at Father Fred's place, not that I have anything wrong with Chit Chat or Father Fred's place or anything else, they all had something to do with my recovery. But they had no Jerry Shulman to give me some psychiatric stuff. I love Jerry, great man. They had no mass. She said, "You don't say mass here. We don't have any priests here. We don't doctors or lawyers or anything else. You're a sick human being, buddy, and you're Pete, and you take out the garbage." And for 6 months, I took out the garbage. And some of the best meditations I ever had in my now 26 years as a monk, 30 years, I guess. As a monk, I made with a plastic bag over my shoulder between the roof and the incinerator, thinking about the 4 last things and, what we're really here for and a lot of stuff. Anyway, I began gradually, slowly to get rid of this ugly thing that was inside me. I drew a picture at one point. We drew a lot of pictures of that it was graphic. They were talking about deflation, ego deflation at depth. And the first picture showed a picture of a big balloon. And on the outside it had H2S. That's hydrogen sulfide. That's the smelly, rotten egg gas, And the balloon was transparent. It had a little solid steel ball in the middle of it. You could see. And from the side over here is a pin beginning to come into appearance. And on the pin is the legend G-O-D. And by the time it pierced the thing in the center picture, and all this smelly gas began to come out. And at the bottom picture, the thing is laying, the balloon is all completely deflated, and the steel ball is right there, and the pin is continuing on and bending on the steel ball. And the message to me, and I'm still very, once I would get down to who I really was, I could not be hurt anymore. My time in Mineola Lodge was one of the most painful times of my life, and I thank God it was. I really believe, for me, and everything I say is my own opinion, that the more painful a recovery, the more apt it is to be real, for me. And I wouldn't want it to be any less painful than it was. Those months and weeks walking around there were absolutely excruciating as I gradually, slowly entered the human race. I was 42, going on 19, His Majesty the baby, arrogance, a really ugly human being, as I see it. I hated everybody, and of course it was my own self-hatred projected on other people, and I had been brought down to, for me, talk about bottoms, I think, for me, my bottom was induced during my stay at that place. But the reason it was induced is they didn't have any psychiatry, they didn't have any medicine, they didn't have any clergy, no 8-lane highways away from this program. For 22 months, I got 3 meetings a day, all about Alcoholics Anonymous. If you are new and gracing us with your presence here today, as all of us did at some point, I guess, and you think there's some better way out there, transactional analysis, transcendental meditation, hypnosis, psychiatry, aversion treatments, I would like to say that I tried most of those things, and none of them have given us the identifiable number of recovering alcoholics that Alcoholics Anonymous has given us. The experts are not in medicine or psychiatry or in the clergy. The experts are in this room. Every one of these recovered people is an expert. But even they don't realize the richness of their fund of understanding and knowledge of themselves and how to live in a heavy drinking society more comfortably without drinking than they ever did with it. Don't underestimate what's in this room and what you have here. I thank God that I finally found this program. I scoffed at it. I thought these aphorisms were trite and everything else. I don't scoff at any word in the 12 steps, the 12 conditions, the slogans. Every one of them are extremely valuable to me and have given me things that I find priceless. I'm in my 15th year now, one day at a time. And I am a happy man. I had one thing that I guess I should mention to you. because I think maybe I might save somebody's life. About 5 years ago, I was down off Naples, Florida, and I was fishing. I love to fish. And I foul hooked a 260-pound giant sea bass in the dorsal fin with a 5/0 hook and 30-pound test monofilament. I thought I had the bottom. I finally raised it, saw that big fin, and there ensued an epic battle. For 3 solid hours, I raised this thing 3 times. I dove in the water. I stabbed it. You know, some things we don't get over. And finally, the fish bellied up, and we put a gas hook in his anal opening and one in the mouth, and we couldn't get him in the boat. He's too big. Towed him back to the thing. I got this big triumphant grin on my face, and I went to get myself and this terribly inept captain a cold drink, and I had a heart attack. And they put me in Naples Hospital, and before I went in, and these are things that I heard, not from psychiatry, religion, or medicine, but here. The wisdom here is incredible. Don't ever underestimate it. They told me, if you ever go to a hospital, for God's sake, tell the doctor you're alcoholic first, quick, before he gives you anything. And tell him that you don't want this stuff. And I told Dr. Lee Light, the cardiologist, I'm alcoholic, and I don't want to take any mind-altering substance, because you come out of Alina Lodge and you really don't want to take anything. And she's apt to get you again. And and he said, Father, he said, you've had a very serious myocardial infarction and you could still die. I guess he had to say this to me. And it was the right thing to say. And I thought about that for a minute. He said, I've got to give you Valium and morphine. This is the way I was formed, or else I have to back away from your case because I don't want to malpractice you in my hands. And I thought about that for a few minutes. And I said, well, doctor, now this is 9.5 years without so much as an aspirin. I said, well, doctor, I'm against suicide, so I'll take whatever you have, but on 2 conditions. One, that whatever you give me of a mood-altering nature be administered to me by somebody other than myself on your say-so, you knowing that I'm alcoholic and don't want anything. And secondly, by the time I leave this place, I want to be straight. He said, you got it. My friends, by the second day, I was really looking forward to that next shot of morphine. It was like a double beefeater martini. I even liked the Valium. That was great, too. I couldn't wait for the nurse to come around. I didn't want to go to sleep. It just felt so great. By the 3rd day, I'd made phone calls I really wish I hadn't made. I won't tell you where they were, but by the morning of the 4th day, I was actually threatening this pretty little nurse, about 3 o'clock in the morning, threatening her job if she didn't call up my doctor and get him to increase the morphine. What am I saying? That you're going to become drug addicts or something like that? No, not necessarily. But I don't think I would have become a morphine addict or a Valium freak or anything like that. I think what I probably would have done is gone back to my first love, ethyl alcohol, and I probably would be dead. I really don't have any doubt about that. I always drove when I drank, and I thank God that I didn't wake up some morning and go out to repark my car, as a buddy of mine did, and find a 3-year-old splash on my front grill. Yeah, all right, now this is the sort of thing I really believe firmly I don't have the right to drink anymore. It's no longer that nicey thing. And I think these ladies from MAD, they'd like to shoot us all, and I disagree with that. But their outrage is not going to go away, and they're helping me to see the enormity of this problem. They're helping every day that goes by. The concept of alcoholism and its ugliness grows in my estimation. I'd like to just say just a couple of things about getting well and then quit. I'm glad I'm alcoholic. I'm glad that I am recovering alcoholic. I thank God. I don't know of anything that would have, at my 56th year, have me stopping smoking, eating properly, taking good care of myself. I'm healthy as a horse. I'll go a couple rounds with any 56-year-old in this room. But not 55. And I really, I'm creaking as I get out of bed in the morning, but it's a worthwhile thing, and my emotional growth is incredible to me. I really was damaged badly living in an alcoholic home. It took me 42 years to come upon that, I've forgiven my father. It was a great relief to realize that he had a disease, and I began getting well when I accepted that disease concept. And I think we're being vindicated now. A lot of this biochemical findings are taking place. Tetrahydroisoquinoline and so forth, this dopamine combined. But that's not important. The important thing is, like some guy said, I broke my strainer, and it doesn't repair. That's over. And the emotional growth, the spiraling upward, every time I sit in my seat and turn the air blue in a traffic jam and that thing think comes up in front of me, and I pause and I think, you jerk, you could have left 10 minutes earlier, or so what if you don't get there at the right time? All the things that you've taught me. And I sit in that seat and I go from a blue funk into something akin to ecstasy, just by utilizing the tools that you've given me within. But it takes practice, and you try and you fail, and you try and you fail, and you keep growing, and the spiral ever upward. And every new relationship benefits by what you learned yesterday, and every new season that comes about is another new experience. I'm really anticipating the springtime, because it's not just the consciousness of last springtime. It's not circular. It's upward spiraling, and it goes up, and there's no end to it. People used to say, Pete, it keeps getting better. And I wanted to hit him in the mouth. Because it wasn't getting any better for me in those first couple of years. But I have to reiterate what I heard. It is, even now, it is getting better. As long as we, take this thing seriously, continue to grow, and never forget where we came from. But most of all, you've given me back my priesthood. My Mass, I whatever you believe, I honor. And this is me. My Mass means more to me than it ever did in my life. And it's not that shallow, holy card Jesus that I had my first fervor with. That was genuine, but very shallow. It's through people in rooms like this that God has spoken to me in so many different ways and put flesh and blood on that cold structure of theology that I learned at one time in philosophy. It's that thing that each one of you can feel as we look at each other right now in this room and are conscious of where we are, conscious, aware, that has enriched me in a way, and I've said this many times, I just wish I could take some of the real caring that I find in places like this and take it with me into church on Sunday. But I think this is what Christ was talking about. People loving people. People healing people. I thank you for asking me to be a part of this breakfast. I thank you for my life, the growth that I've been privileged to have up to this point, the promise of further growth in the future. I'm not even afraid to die. I used to be terrified to die. The heart pack taught me that, and I know that came out of this program. That's not something I'm putting on. I was ready to go. I thank you for the spiritual growth that is possible, the dimensions to my priesthood that never would have been there, the ability to empathize and help other people that came out of this program. The only difference between my father and myself, as I stand here right now, is you. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for that inspiring message. One of my other duties is to present you with a gift in appreciation for speaking here this morning. And I'm told that in this package There are the keys to a brand new Seville parked out in front. That's what I'm told. Before I ask you to close, there's one other piece of business that I must attend to, and that's to tell everyone here that this morning's meeting is available on tape, and you can get it as you leave in the lobby. And Peter, would you be kind enough to close?
Would those of you care to join me? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power,